Hi guys, how are you? I hope you're well. My name is Auntie Wamaju Nduts, and today I want to make samosas. Okay, so I love making East African food as well as the snacks. We have some of the most delicious savories and sweets in snacks, and today we are going to make samosas from scratch. This is a very good and useful skill to have. Now, when making samosas, I usually use this flour. If you want to make just the very best for your family, things we remember from memory, crunchy, tasty, savory. But you can also use some wrappers from the Asian store. I'll show you. So these wrappers, you can use this for your samosas or spring rolls. They are very nice and crunchy when they're hot. They get a bit soggy when they are not, okay? So for the authentic samosa taste, I prefer using the flour. For this, we'll make some spring rolls soon, okay? So we're gonna turn to the table. When I am making anything with a dough, I never use a bowl. If I'm making chapati or something like that, I use my tabletop, okay? So that may seem strange, but that's what we are going to do. I'm going to use 3 cups of flour. I love King Arthur. This is not a paid ad. It's just that whenever I go somewhere and I find a good flour, I like to share. So this is good for chapati. Their bread flour is good. Their whole wheat flour is really good too for chapati. So this is the flour. Okay, so we'll do 3 cups of this. Actually, let's do 4. I feel like it's little. So this is to make our pastry, okay? And I'm not going to be adding any salt, but I will add oil to this. So next goes in our oil, and I'm going to sort of do a rubbing method with that. So just mixing the oil by rubbing it into the flour. So why I add oil is because when you're frying this, it's very likely to give you a better crust than if you did not use any oil. So just rub your flour, just rub the oil into the flour. You will notice it will form a bit of lumps, and you just rub them between your fingers. That will work. Yeah, just make sure you've incorporated all the oil and you'll be good to go. So then I'm going to use 1 cup of water. This is 1 cup. I'm not going to pour it all at once because I'm not used to measuring. So if we are going to use more than 1 cup, I'll tell you. But what we are going for is a very stiff dough. So stiffer than chapati. Very important that you make it stiff. So I've used a little less than 1.5 cups. So just that's the much remaining. So 1.5 would be okay for 4 cups of flour. This is a stiff kind of flour. It's not so soft, so it's very pliable, easy to use. gives you a very good farm product. And this is what I'm going for, very stiff flour. And what I'm going to do now is knead it. Whenever you're working with wheat flour, especially the white wheat flour, whether you're using your hands or a mixer, you need to stretch the gluten. Okay, so that's the secret of a very good flour product. So this is the way to stretch. This is the method you use when you're making bread. I use this method of stretching. Just stretch it out, bring it back until you see it becoming more pliable. So I do that whenever I'm making chapatis or any other kind of dough with hand or by hand. The thing of it is, with chapatis or just samosas, we grew up using the kneading method. That is where you just go into a bowl with your fist. But if you're using a surface, you can just stretch the gluten just like I'm doing. And you notice, because it's very stiff, it doesn't stick to the surface. So do it for about 10 minutes. You will notice it gets softer. So this should be ideally softer. This is the kind of dough you wouldn't be able to make in a mixer, because it would strain your mixer too much, yeah? So it has to be hand done. And so you need to continue kneading it for a while. And then, just like with any dough product, once you've made your dough, you have to let it rest for about 15 minutes tops, okay? No, and more, 15 minutes and more. So I'm just going to leave it on the counter and cover while we go make our filling, which will be ground beef today with lots of onions. Okay, so I'm going to show you the ingredients we're going to be making for the filling. Then we'll come stretch our dough again and then start to develop. So I have this ground beef. Ideally, it should be a little more fatty when you're making samosas, but this is quite lean, but it will do. So when making this filling with ground beef, I never add any oil, mostly because I would use a more fatty beef, but also because you don't want it leaking, once you've used it as a filling. I apologize for the position of my hand. I wasn't even aware, that it's being filmed. It still has some dough on it. Anyway, so you need to break apart your ground beef because it comes really tightly packed. And then I added some garlic. This is just fresh garlic that I pounded. And this spices of choice will be coriander, cumin, some mixed spices, and salt and black pepper. If you need to use different spices, that's okay, because every house has its flavors. And one thing I don't use when I'm making samosas for the home is chilies. You need green chilies ideally, but for us, we don't really consume a lot of hot chilies. So I've added some already chopped red onions and some spring onions. Another substitute that would be so great for the ground beef, for this filling, would be leeks, very thinly chopped. But today I'm using some spring onions. And then I have some coriander, and I added some of the sticks, the sticky side of corianders. And then we'll finish off with some leaves at the very end. Now, how I make this ground beef is by adding the onions in small portions, alternating between the red onions and the spring onions. And then I let them cook for a bit and soften and also flavor the meat. And then I add a bit more. Why I do this is because if you add the red onions all at once, they they get a bit watery and they may produce the same taste. So you need to just develop the flavor more slower, and that is actually what I did here. Okay, and as I finish, I add all my coriander leaves. These are thinly chopped as well, and this will add so much more flavor and a bit of a fresh kick. So coriander does really well in this dish. So it's almost done, and it's softer, it's very flavorful, it smells really good. We've really developed the flavor in those onions, and this is very, very important. Okay, so it's all done. The flavors of spices, garlic, onions, coriander all coming together, and you can add you can adjust this seasoning at the end. Okay, so that's all done, and we leave it to cool. And now we are back here. Our dough is very well rested. As you can see, it's stretching very easily. I don't want to stretch it a bit more. I don't want to do any more stretching, so I just rolled it into a log shape, and now I'm going to form my tiny samosa balls. Each of these balls is supposed to produce 4 pieces of the samosa wrapper. Okay, so you cut according to the eventual size you want here. For me, I want some good size samosas, as you saw from the beginning. If you want smaller or cocktail samosas, then you cut off a tiny ball of dough. Hey, so when making these balls of dough, you want them to be about the same size. I'm eyeballing here, but you can weigh on a weighing scale if you want them to be the same size. And I will go ahead and roll out to a small, almost like a roti. So just a bit thick still, and set it on the side. I'm going to repeat this rolling method to just about that size and set it on the side. And this is what we are going to make our samosa wrappers out of. The reason why we leave them small and still thick is because we are going to bundle them all up together and then spread them out thin. And so you want to have that thickness, and then we'll spread it out a little more. So we've been doing this for a while, and it's coming out so nicely. We've been able to spread all our 9 pieces, and now we are going to go into the next step, which will be adding some oil in between. Now, when I was learning this, we would do just 2, okay, 2 at a time, and you can start with 2 or 3, and you add oil and spread it on the surface, and then sprinkle some flour. Okay, so if you're still beginning, you can add just 3 balls or the spread out dough. Just 3 will be enough for starters. That will make you about 3 times 4, about 12. Okay, so 12 at a time. But if you're comfortable, you can do more. Okay, I usually do about 10, and today, since I have just 9, I will do all of them. Okay, now when you add this together, the flour you put in between may help when spreading out, so that the dough doesn't stick together. Also, the oil you add in between should just be enough to spread it out, and because if you add too much, it's going to cause the next roll out to slide away. Okay, so we take extra caution by making sure that once we add the last dough piece, we are going to press with our fingers right on the sides. Okay, so like press all around the surface, all around the edges, just like that. okay? Not too much that it will cause them to stick together, but just enough to make sure that you put them together once you start rolling. Okay, and now once we start rolling, we need to have enough flour so that our dough just glides. You want to have a feather touch, okay? Don't put too much, pressure on the rolling pin, because this would make it stick together, make some of the pieces stick together, okay? Make sure your surface is floured well, and also the top of the dough. And we start with the side that has the imprint of our fingers, okay? But we have to keep checking underneath, because sometimes when you spread on top like this, when you're rolling on top, the other pieces underneath may remain too small, and then the ones you have access to continue to widen, okay? So make sure that there's not too much pressure on that rolling pin. And like I was explaining, you see this thing that happens, they kind of separate, and the smallest of the last piece actually remains small. So you have to turn it at this point at least once, okay? So you roll it again from the bottom side, and you just roll it so softly. Keep your touch very light, keep the pressure very minimum, okay? And make sure you spread out the sides too, the edges, because you want them to thin out, but at the same time you make sure the middle too is spread out. Like if you can do it evenly, it would be best. Watch out for the edges, make sure that everything is being spread evenly at the same time, okay? So once you get to the desired size, and this will be according to how big or small you want your samosas, okay? So you want about half an inch or quarter an inch thickness. Actually, a quarter an inch works well, yeah? And then I'm going to divide this right in the middle, and then at this point I want to have the quarters, okay? So after this, I'm going to warm a pan, okay? Keep it hot actually, and then we are going to use this pan to separate the layers, or we're going to use the heat through the pan to separate the layers. Make sure that the pan is completely dry, okay? So what happens here, once you put your pieces on the pan, is that the heat will separate because of the oil, okay? Will separate the layers. So what happens is that you keep turning and removing the layer that has been separated, and remove it completely and keep it on the side. Those are now what we'll use as the wrappers, okay? Don't let this color avoid or prevent it from coloring. Once you flip it, you should just remove the top, and even if the second layer is loose, you can remove it too, so that you prevent color from forming, okay? So if it is loose, even if you didn't put it through the heat, it will be good enough to use, as long as it's firm and it has loosened from the batch, okay? So you just pry it open from any of the corners, and then if you can remove the second one, it would be great. If not, you just flip it again to the second side. It takes about 2 seconds to have it warm through and separate from the rest. So the top one will always separate fast, obviously, because as you go into the inner part, the other ones are still stuck together. Yeah. All right, so you keep doing that, you repeat that process, okay? Ensure that you don't let the dough color, because what we are aiming for is just to separate the layers. We don't want to cook the dough at all. The separation and also helps in firming, because when the wrappers are not firm, they can get very sticky when you're working with. So you want it to be a little bit firm and easy to separate. So we'll keep repeating the process to get our layers. we have done it, and it's quite a process. It can be quite tedious, but you want to work with this dough while it is still fresh. Once you have your pieces together like that, you can decide to organize them afresh, but it's always best if you keep them together from the time you're drying them in the pan. Okay, so I'm going to show you a bit slowly how I fold them, and I've just put them in in a plastic bag so that they don't get too dry on the edges. Okay, and then I had to make a slurry. I just added the flour into a bowl, about 3 tablespoons of, and I mixed some with some water, some cold water. Okay, so this is what I do. I take the rounded side, I fold it at the very center, I add some of the slurry, and I fold the other side over. Okay, so you get a triangle shape. Make sure that where the corners connect, it's really tightly crossed together. Okay, so make sure it overlaps so well and the corner remains very, very tight, almost completely shut. So just like that, at the center, you fold at the center, bring the other side over. Okay, and the slurry you use to glue it together. And now that you've seen that, okay, just like that, it takes a bit of practice before you can do this professionally. Even I am not at that point, okay? But at least I can make some decent samosas. So if you like doing this kind of stuff or you just like learning, it's good to practice often. And that way you'll get very, very good samosas. Also, now, because of how we measured and how far we rolled out, that is how we get very thin pockets. You never want your pockets to be thick because it becomes very, it doesn't taste as good, okay, when you've done your samosas, okay? And it's also it gets very bulky once you add the filling. So make sure your wrappers are really thin, and the only way to know is by how much you spread your dough, okay? Or you roll it out. So I'm following the very same procedure. I don't make any different changes. At some point I was feeling like my wrappers are really huge, so I cut on the edges again. But not too much. I want to maintain about the same size. Some are quite small, of course, the ones that you see me keeping on the side, and that is because of the smallest one. When you're rolling out, you get that small one underneath. Okay, so we are all done here. Our meat is nicely cooled down, and so what we are going to do is fill up our pastry. Okay, this is like a filo pastry, only a bit thicker. So I'm going to use about 1.5 tablespoons of the filling or so. I found 2 tablespoons to be too much. You also don't want to put too much meat because it feels like that is all you're eating, and yet you want to enjoy the crispy pastry as well. Okay, so once you've added the pastry, you want to tuck in the front part. The front part is usually shorter, and then the sharp edge, that triangular sharp edge, is where you apply your flour, just at the very edge. You don't have to add the slurry or the glue on every part of the flap. You just make sure to add it on the edges, or to apply only the edges, okay, the inner edges. Okay, so on to the next one, about 1.5 to 2 tablespoons. Yeah, these flaps were quite these wrappers were quite big. And then you tuck in just like that, apply the glue to the edges, and you have yourself a samosa. Okay, and so we're going to repeat that process. Make sure that your wrapper is quite firm, even though it is thin. Now, if you find that it is too thin and too flimsy, that it looks like there would be a danger of tearing, you can actually put 2 wrappers together. Just insert one into the other. Okay, but So far so good. I did see one that I had to do that, but that can be quite rare if you do your pockets correctly.
햇살이 너무 좋았어. 그냥 모두 좋았어. 널 만나서 모든 게 다 잠에서 깨어나서 휴대폰을 먼저 보게 돼. 참 많이 변했다네가. 세상에서 제일 행복한 순간 널 만나고 매일 겪게 돼. 매일은 감사하죠. 그대가 곁에 있어서 언제나 오늘 같길 기도해요. 그대와 함께라는 건 영원한 축복 같아서 오늘도 널 바라보며 웃는다.
Hey, so we've used up all our meat and I had some cabbage on the side, so I filled the remaining small pocket. And yeah, we're going to have a few veggie samosas. Cabbage also can be a good filling, just like in spring rolls. So now that we've done all of that, you can store your samosas raw or pre-cooked like that, or you can fry some. I wanted to fry some. Now, this is where I made a mistake because I let the oil get too hot, and as soon as I added the samosas, some got, like a pimply surface. So I would notice that the ones I cooked later after storing, and I cooked at the right temperature because I wanted them, to look better, actually came out much better. So make sure that your oil is hot, but not too hot. You want to make sure that your samosas, the skin doesn't react immediately to the hot oil, okay? So this is also a practice that you have to, keep doing so that you get the correct temperature and get the correct, look to your samosas. Alrighty, and here is the pimply look, and these others looked a bit better that we ate a few days later, and they looked really good. So that is the tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye bye.